Do I really want to prove people wrong my whole life, or am I working towards something else?
Well, again, it makes sense why you did that.
Right.
Because how did it feel when you were a nobody?
Clay Stelzer, founder of 1560. It was established to help business leaders and their teams wake up the patterns, keeping them from achieving what they want most. Veteran coaches that are committed to ending sleep working. What the hell is that? I know sleep talking, but what am I working while I'm sleeping, or what is it?
And there's different versions of the line. What you mean by the line is it's really a reflection of our state of mind in any moment. We're above the line or below the line. We're either in a safe state or we're in a threatened state. There are three things our brains are constantly scanning for: threat to our security, to our approval, or to our control. We're driven by fear. There's this idea in conscious leadership of each of us taking 100% responsibility for the outcomes we're experiencing, even though those decisions are often made from instinctual, normal human behavior.
I've almost got to let my insecurities come out and the fear come out. They like to chill in a host and live in that dark space.
When you shine a light on it, it loses its power. All roads lead to getting in touch with that part of ourself that is so deeply scared that he needs to react a certain way to feel worthy. And it really is a process of falling in love with yourself.
I think I'm really excited for this episode because I think anybody watching, we have a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, business owners watching that will get a ton of value from this. But I think even if you're not that, you'd still get a ton of value from this because it's ultimately about working on yourself and how do you build yourself up and grow as a person. I saw you speak live at an event downtown Chicago with Kevin Kay and his group. And I remember being blown away and just taking notes and learning things and reflecting and being like, man, I'm showing up this way. Like, I need to rethink how I'm, and the line and all this stuff with conscious leadership and all the stuff we got into. So I want to quickly, before we get too far into it, just for context for the audience here, I want to explain what you do in your company. So 1560 is your business, correct?
Correct.
And it was established to help business leaders and their teams wake up the patterns, keeping them from achieving what they want most.
Yeah.
And your group is veteran coaches that are committed to ending sleep working, which I'm sure we'll get into what that is. I think you might be hearing that and thinking, what the hell is that? I know sleep talking, but what am I working while I'm sleeping, or what is it? In your own lives, in our own lives, and supporting our clients do the same. So knowing that our audience is founders, business owners, CEOs, which I know you mostly work with, right?
Yeah.
Where should we start? Like with all of the things that we could talk about today, do we start with what is the line, going below the line? Do we start conscious leadership? Like, what do you, because there's a lot to tackle when it comes to these topics and what you do. Like, where's the maybe simplest way to get going with this?
Well, I think the reason why founders, CEOs, senior executives should care about this stuff is I have seen that business culture is a direct reflection of a leader's leadership.
Yeah.
Simply stated. And so if that's true, then I think it's really important for any leader to be aware of how they're showing up. Fairly straightforward.
Yep.
And human beings are designed to show up in ways that aren't helpful. Before we're brilliant leaders and CEOs, we're animals. We're human beings designed to stay alive, first and foremost. And oftentimes, we get caught in drama because we're simply in a survival strategy. We're driven by fear. And most of the time, we're unaware that that's happening. So the business that I run, all of the personal work I do in my own life, and I've needed to do it, is waking up to my patterns so I can stop myself before I make a decision that's going to lead me to an outcome that I don't want, even though those decisions are often made from instinctual, normal human behavior.
I love it. Perfectly said. So I think if there's value we could provide to the audience, it's probably going to be a lot of things. But I think one of those is understanding those patterns and how people are showing up and making them aware of it, and then why it's happening, and then probably teaching them what to do about it so that they show up in the best way they can. Right? Yeah. So should we start with the line? What's the best way? How do we tackle something like this?
So the line. So there's a really great book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And one of probably my most influential mentor, Jim Duthmer, and the Conscious Leadership Group, they're the ones that kind of put the line on the map. And there's different versions of the line. What I mean by the line, what you mean by the line is it's really a reflection of our state of mind in any moment. Basically, we're above the line or below the line, but what that means is we're either in a safe state where we're more interested about learning and being curious and being creative and growing connection, or we're below the line. When we're below the line, we're in a threatened state. When we're in a threatened state, we're really righteous about our thoughts. We're trying to prove to everyone that we're right. We're defensive. We're closed off. And the scientists will tell you that human beings spend 90% of their time below the line.
Jeez.
Not because we're bad people, not because we're not brilliant, intelligent folks, but again, that's just how our species has survived for as many years as we have. So really good that we have those mechanisms built in. So when I'm out on the street, before I even have a chance to think, when a car is approaching me at a fast rate of speed, I know to jump out of the way.
That's you going below the line and then reacting very fast. Right.
But here's where it gets interesting and more consequential potentially is when I'm in a boardroom with someone and someone says something and I go below the line and I want to jump out of the way.
There we go.
Or I want to attack them, or I want to get defensive, or all of that is it's the same system, same part of the brain showing up trying to keep us safe. But ultimately, I don't know how many boardrooms I've ever been in where it's actually dangerous.
Right, like physically dangerous. You're probably not going to get stabbed by a pen or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our brains don't distinguish between threats to our physical survival and threats to our personalities or our egos.
Right.
That's where things get, I think, quite interesting.
So how do you see this show up from the CEOs that you work with? Like, what is the core problems that they're having that maybe folks listening to this are having right now that they say, oh, gosh, that kind of, I see myself in that.
Yeah. So I have a lot of CEOs that approach me that feel stuck in Groundhog's Day. They're having the same conversations. They're getting the same results. They're blaming others in their organization for those results. And I love it. Lots of times I have a CEO approach me saying, hey, Clay, can you come in and work with my team or my middle management team to
I know where you're going with this.
Help them get their shit together. And generally the response would be, thank you for calling. I'd love to work with your team, but would you be willing to get curious about how you're showing up in a way that's leading them to behave exactly the way they're behaving? We all do it. Mm-hmm. There's this idea in conscious leadership of each of us taking 100% responsibility for the outcomes we're experiencing. And usually it's a little bit of a shock to a CEO to hear that. But then, in a 15-minute conversation, they'll quickly see that their blaming is usually coming from a place of fear. They're below the line, probably scared of losing control, probably scared of some financial downside to the company, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're reacting in a way to help them feel safe in some way, but that is being felt by their employees in a way that isn't helpful. Mm-hmm. We start blaming. We start checking out. We start not delegating or not giving feedback. We start doing things that help us feel seemingly safe, but it creates drama, and it ultimately creates the negative outcome we're trying to avoid in the first place.
But Clay, what if there's lazy people? I've told them the same thing 100 times. What if they're not ambitious? What do you I'm sure you get that.
Yeah, sure. Right. So so taking responsibility also might mean ensuring you've got the right people in the right seats.
Right.
So, if you have lazy people that aren't that aren't excited about coming to work each day, well, that's a different kind of conversation. However, interesting enough, that happens all the time, and I see lots of CEOs below the line not letting those people go because they're scared of having the conversation. They're scared of sharing with someone that is seemingly loyal bad news. And so we hold on to a bad situation because they're wanting to avoid conflict. Again, that's a survival strategy. That's a very typical below the line behavior.
What are some examples of the below the line stuff? And then I want to get into the 3 reasons we go below the line. Because I remember it was like security, it was status, or something like safety. But what are give us some examples, like talking shit behind someone's back, reacting, very aggressively and not listening to somebody. Like, what are some of these things that you'd say, okay, I'm below the line?
Yeah. Well, all the ones you said are good ones.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different models to kind of talk about dysfunction. And when I say dysfunction, it's just, again, natural, normal behavior. When human beings feel scared, they behave in ways that aren't helpful.
Is that important to note first when you're going through this and trying to better yourself that, hey, if I'm feeling this way, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a normal, it's okay. Like I can stop and say, you know what? Yeah, just take a second to breathe and acknowledge this, right?
I love that you said that, because one of the strategies I have as a coach is more than anything, I think if I'm doing my job well, I'm helping people see themselves and see those patterns, but a really quick follow-up is normalizing it.
Why is that important? Because
we don't want to beat ourselves up, because that doesn't help, because now we're going to go further below the line and we're flogging ourselves. I do a lot of normalizing. It is natural. All of what we're doing, all of the drama that we're experiencing in our lives and in our businesses, it all makes sense once we understand. It's always going to be someone is scared of something happening. I mean, I can simplify it that much. We can take any of these scenarios, blaming, defensiveness, checking out, gossiping, all of that. It's all fear-based. And so once we understand that, and once we understand that what we're doing is just simply a way to ease our fear, now we have a chance to have a discussion about it. So I love to help people say, of course you're reacting that way. You probably learned that when you were a kid at some level. That probably has served you over many years to check out or numb out when things get hard. And is that helping you now? I love the saying, what has helped us be successful in the first half of our life is the very thing that gets in the way of our success the second half of our life.
That's good.
And so I got a great example, my own example. So I spent the first half of my life anxious and exhausted and panicky. And I did that because I was below the line, fearing that if I didn't show up a certain way with everyone around me, I wouldn't be worthy in the world. And I learned that survival strategy as a young person. That strategy helped me be incredibly successful in the first half of my career. I got promoted, I got raises, I crushed everything from my clients and all my bosses. Like, I did really good work. I was really good at guessing how people wanted me to show up, and I did exactly that, and I was rewarded for it until something had to give, because I was a shell of a human being and I had lost self. So really helpful strategy in the first half of my life, but I had to break that strategy if I had any chance of really feeling alive and successful in the second half of my life.
Do you find, because I think about my own life and I'm like, it's similar. It's like I was kind of a troubled kid in high school, in and out of trouble, went to 3 different high schools. It was just like, but I built this, I graduated a super senior, not with my class. Like, it was just all these different things, and I take ownership for it now, but I know why I acted out and stuff. But I kind of used that as a chip on my shoulder for many years after that to then make my life better and work really hard and get things done. And I want to show the world that I'm going to, I'm going to be something. And all these people that doubted me in high school, rightfully so, they doubted me, but I'm going to show them, my parents and friends and this people. And I feel like it fueled me for a long time. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, but I don't know if this is the next healthy thing that I should be working toward. It's like, I don't care. Do I really want to prove people wrong my whole life, or am I working towards something else?
Well, again, it makes sense why you did that.
Right.
Because how did it feel when you were a nobody?
Not good.
It felt not good. And so we learned that I don't want to ever feel like that again. And so I'm going to prove to everyone that I'm not that.
That's it.
That's it. And so we keep going, and we learn to feel okay in the world. I'm never going to be that again. I need to be something different. And we ensure that there is no way I'm going in reverse. I'm sure that served you. I'm sure that helped you feel good, until it got exhausting to have to prove to everyone that you're worthy. Because I tell you what, we haven't known each other that long, but I guarantee you, regardless of how well you did in high school, you were absolutely worthy.
Yeah.
You were a kid that just wanted to be loved like the rest of us.
Dang. That's so true. I think part of it for me was I realized that nobody really cared anyways. If I proved them wrong or proved them right, or it was I started my business. I was like, I'm going to show them I'm going to have a successful business. And then you start to have success and you're like, no one cares. Yeah. They're busy doing their own life.
Yeah. And you're totally right. And you doing that, you trying to prove to everyone it's all about you and it has nothing to do with them.
So if someone's in that mindset, how do you kind of work through them to maybe see it, like, what's the other path? Like, it's like, well, I don't know. I've just always been motivated by like, people are like, I've all these issues from the past, or I like want to prove something. And I have this deep desire because of how I grew up. I didn't grow up with anything. And now I want to make something. Like, is there a better way to be inspired internally? Like, where do you go from there?
Yeah. So the first thing that all roads lead to getting in touch with that part of ourself that is so deeply scared that he needs to react a certain way to feel worthy, and let that one know that he is perfect just the way he is. Let him understand that that strategy is no longer needed. And there's an abundance of love here. And it really is a process of falling in love with yourself, falling in love with that scared one, so he can begin to trust you. So the next time you're in some corporate setting and there's that fear of, oh no, I need to show up a certain way, you can take a moment and he'll be aware of your presence. You've now built some trust with him because you've done some work. He knows now that, wait a minute, that old narrative I've been playing out that I need to be someone actually isn't true. Doesn't matter what happens in this meeting. None of this shit matters. I'm a good guy. There's nothing lacking here. So just take some work to help that young scared one see the world accurately now that we're adults, and then offer him the love that he ultimately only wanted back in the day. All he wanted was to be loved.
But what's the balance between, what if you are doing shitty things and like you need to look in the mirror and change and, maybe treat people better or treat yourself better? Is there a balance of like, I know you'll probably say like, hey, you should always love yourself to a certain degree for the person you are, but is there something to be said about, yeah, you should love yourself, but also like you do need to make some changes? Like, you're feeling like this because you are kind of acting like an idiot right now. Like, how do you think about that?
Well, usually we act like idiots when we're driven by fear.
That's right. That's so right.
So what's going on that's leading us to a place of fear? What are we scared of?
Right.
And usually it's old shit.
Right.
And so it's all roads lead back to fear.
It's almost, you're saying like almost before you can kind of like really embrace the self-love, you have to look at the fear and look at internally and say.
And that's why I try to normalize it so we can be in a comfortable, even a funny conversation about it. Like this can feel really heavy if we want it to feel heavy, but it can also be pretty playful. If we want it to be,
exactly.
Which I enjoy doing.
I do too.
Yeah.
What do you say? Because I work with a lot of CEOs, founders, execs, and even myself. I feel like there's times when now I really appreciate my strengths and what I have to offer and the things that make me unique, even if they're like seen as flaws. But sometimes I feel like we look in the mirror and we crush ourselves. It's like, I don't like this about myself. Why do I have this? No one else has this. It's like, I even do it to myself. It's like we all kind of do it. And I think as I've matured, I've learned to say, yeah, that is different. But I kind of like that. That's kind of cool. Like, where does that come from? Is that a fear? Is that we crush ourselves and like always think, or, people get on video and they're like, I sound weird, I look stupid. It's like, no, you don't.
Well, right. So it's all survival strategy. So we constantly are scanning for what's going to sink us as human beings. And we're going to skip over all of what looks good. And we're going to find the one thing that we believe is going to lead us to being judged in some way. It's just what we do. It's survival strategy. And generally we build a story about it. Even before this show, like I was in the mirror looking at my hair, like, I don't know, how the hell do I look? But there's a part of me that was like, well, shit, what if I don't look good?
Right.
And that's me below the line, natural and normal. And if I sit here and I get present, I realize it doesn't make a goddamn difference what people think of me, because I know that there's a worthiness, and I know that there's enough here for me. So we look in the mirror, we see something. We're always trying to avoid. Well, you asked a question before. What are the things that push us below the line?
Yes, I do want to cover that. Yeah, I didn't forget about that.
This is a good segue, actually.
Yeah, okay.
So the model I use that it's never let me down is that there are three things our brains are constantly scanning for, trying to avoid. It's a threat to our security, to our approval, or to our control. So anytime we are believing
Write that one down, guys, because I took this down when I saw you live, and it was if you break everything down and you go below the line, it does come back to these.
One, two, or three of these things always. Whenever someone's gossiping, whenever someone's checking out, whenever you're picking a fight, whenever you're doing anything that is in the way of the life you want to live, what do I feel is threatened right now? My security, my approval, or my control? And I can offer a little bit of detail as to what I mean by those.
Yeah, please.
Security is just, do I have the resources I need to stay alive? Do I have a roof over my head, food on the table? Can I take care of my family, et cetera, et cetera? But also, am I still going to have a job? Am I going to get the raise I'm wanting? Am I going to get the promotion I'm wanting? Is there uncertainty in the market? So CEOs that are listening to this, I talked with one this morning. It was a great tech company, and he's sitting here worrying because the economy is soft, especially in technology right now. Yeah, it makes sense. My security is threatened in some way. That's natural and normal. Now, for me, the question becomes, well, how do you want to react knowing that your security is threatened? Do you want to, go like this and react in unhelpful ways because it's a survival strategy? Or do you want to be present, recognize that you'll probably never be under a bridge panhandling, asking for money? I mean, this guy's got millions in the bank.
Right.
Yet our brain is like, oh my gosh, the market's soft, and it's believing that we may not have the resources we need to survive. So a little bit of this is truth telling and reminding ourselves that the truth of the world is not matching up with how our brain is processing this. Anyway, so that's security. Okay. Second is approval. This is what you were just talking about, looking in the mirror. It's what I was talking about me looking in the mirror. We like to be liked. We like to be loved. We want people to think we're enough, smart enough, funny enough, a good enough leader, a good enough husband, son, whatever.
Is that just a tribal thing? Because we're tribal and we
want
to,
Yeah, I mean, however many years ago, if you were kicked out of your tribe or your colony or whatever kind of group you were in,
you were kind of screwed.
It was a death sentence because human beings aren't designed to hunt and gather and do everything you need to do to survive. So anytime these crazy animals that we are, if we feel separated or we're going to be separated from the others, we go below the line and start reacting from a place of survival.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the third one is control. We don't like curveballs. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like stuff coming out of left field. I like to have a say as to what's happening to me and the people around me. As soon as I sense that I don't know what's going to happen, we go below the line and we react. I can't ensure my survival with uncertainty here. So, I mean, we can play. I mean, if there's any example you have of something you've heard or something in your life, we can link it back to security, approval, or control. This is what you saw in that talk.
Yeah.
All roads lead back to those three things in my experience.
So I was on a call with the founder, and they had someone handling their social media management. But I knew, and I could tell right away before the call, that this person, I want to be nice here, but just they hadn't had a lot of experience with video and social media marketing. And so I come on and I'm like, this is my craft. I live this stuff. I breathe this stuff. Like, I am passionate about it. I love it. I've helped clients for a few years now, dozens and dozens of clients. So when I see someone that is trying to act like they know everything about a certain topic that I am an expert in, and I look at their set and like they have never even done a video in their life. And they're trying to kind of tell me what the route should be. And I'm like, respectfully, I think we should go a different route. But there was a period of time where I would handle that a little bit more defensively, where I would kind of be like, hey, dude, you don't, I would almost want to say, you don't know what you're talking about. And I do. And here's why. Because I put in the work. I've made the mistakes. I've got punched in the face a million times. I made myself look like an idiot on video, but I learned all this. And now I know the direction we need to go. Yeah. So what are the three again? Say them again.
Security, approval, and control.
So I could see that being part control because I wanted to control the outcome, but maybe
you couldn't.
And I couldn't, right? And it was almost like, please sit down. I know what's best here, but this person was interfering. Yeah. Is that mainly what you see from that example?
I imagine that's at least part of it. I'd also start to get curious. We build identity around our expertise. So you've been doing this, getting punched in the face for years and years and years, and there's some credit that part of who you are is your knowledge. Yeah. And you got some bozo coming in that's basically saying, I'm as smart as you. I get curious if there was some approval threatened.
That's what I was thinking too, the secondary thing. Yeah.
Like, what does this guy think of me? What do I think of me? Like, your identity was sort of threatened at some level, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then security, I don't know, like if there was a big a financial upside to winning this person as a client, and all of a sudden that's going away, or maybe you're stressed about money prior to that, that could have had an impact. I don't know. I mean, we could dive into that, but makes sense to me that you could be below the line because at least one or two of those things was tripped up.
Yep.
And then your reactive natural response was to probably clobber the guy at some level.
Which I didn't, but no. But
well, not like physically clobber him.
No, I know, but even that, I think I could have done better, to be honest.
What was your natural response? How did you react from that? You said you were defensive for a while? Or?
Yeah, I just kind of like tried to sidestep what they were saying and like go my own site. But I would be like, you don't have that because this isn't happening. Or this is, it was kind of like, I feel like looking back now, I could have worded it a little bit differently or said, hey, help me understand that. Or let me get a little curious about that. Instead, it was kind of like, yeah, you don't know, you're not getting the results. So how would it be working? Like I was a little bit more aggressive, but I wasn't like rude. I wasn't like, you're an idiot. Like I would never do that. But
were you feeling pretty righteous about what's the right way to do
this? It was almost like, I know the right way and you're on the wrong path. Yeah. And so what are we doing here?
That is a typical below the line reactive behavior. Is proving to someone that you're right. We all get caught in this.
What should we do instead?
What you just said.
Okay.
Curiosity is a really good one.
But how far do you take that when they're still, you're getting curious, you're learning, okay, I understand why you think that now. There's still wrong. Like, where do we go from that, Clay?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can handle it. And depends on it. I think the answer to the question depends on what you want in your relationship with that other person. If you actually care, so if this is happening with someone you care about, you just probably met this guy. Maybe you don't care about the relationship.
Right.
Let's talk about that because that I think may be more interesting. So when we go below the line with people we care about, I think one of the best things we can do is out ourselves. I do this with my wife all the time. Hey, Kristen, I just went below the line. I'm sitting over here in my monkey mind thinking that you're not believing I'm a good enough husband or a good enough father right now. And rather than me picking a fight with you, I just want to let you know I just got triggered. I'm below the line. And so just by me outing that,
that's so good.
I get back into connection with her rather than going away, which is what happens typically.
And is that because you're getting vulnerable? She now knows what you're thinking inside and you're addressing it versus holding it inside, right?
Yeah. And she'll thank me because we're both committed to doing this with one another. And then we can talk about it. Now, I don't know why I brought my wife into this, but it's the same stuff I teach CEOs on how to handle conflicts with their COOs. I mean, here's the deal. If you have any success, if you have any chance of creating anything unique and valuable in the marketplace, you need diversity. You need people that think very differently about the world. That's where creative friction happens. That's where interesting ideas come from. And so the very thing that I believe is required to do interesting innovation work, and that's my background, by the way, before this coaching stuff, I was an innovation consultant. Anyway, if you're not being intentional about how you handle your diversity and your differences, that's where all the drama and sparks fly in all of our teams and our organizations.
Yes. So we've talked about kind of below the line. We've talked about some of the principles. We've talked about kind of why this happens. What do you say to the person though? It's like, okay, it's easy to, I'm sure when you say all this and I'm sitting here nodding my head, everyone's like, okay, that makes total sense. And it's like the next day we go back to like crushing ourselves in the mirror, getting defensive in conversations. Like, how do we sort of build habits and mindsets around this stuff to where it's like, we're catching ourselves, and then what do we even do about it when we catch ourselves?
Yeah.
Like, what's the solution?
Well, I think first and foremost, understanding how the game is played is the first thing. Like understanding security, approval, control. Understanding the 3 core behaviors that happen when we're below the line, which we haven't talked about yet.
It's almost like understanding how something's wired. So if you didn't understand your computer kept shutting down and you're like, well, dude, you got to charge it. You're like, oh shit. Like,
the breaker just went downstairs. You got to go into the box and flip the breaker.
Right.
Like once you understand the wiring, I think that's the biggest piece, just understanding it.
Right.
And then we can begin, this is when it gets fun, I think, and where real transformation happens in individuals and organizations, when we can see way more clearly as to why things are happening the way they're happening. I mean, here's the deal, by the way. So I've been studying this stuff and practicing it for many years. I go below the line every day. We're human beings. We're going to go below the line. The difference is that when you practice this stuff, you can recognize it real quick and you can stop yourself before you go make a mess.
So you in the car with your hair, how fast was that?
It was in the bathroom over here. It wasn't in the car.
Okay. So how fast did you go? Dude, it doesn't matter. Like I'm going below the line. I'm worrying about something. Like,
it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there any, like, I'm still trying to think about, is it just something I got to like remember every day or write down? Like, I mean, obviously there's people like you that they can work with if they really want to go deep on it, and they should. But what, for someone like me, what is the next step? I know all this information now. It's like, do I just like write it down and think about it every day and like, hey, I'm going below the line, recognize it, and then act on it? Like, how do I embed it in my mind?
Yeah.
I'll still go below the line,
yeah,
but so I react, in better ways.
Practice.
Yeah.
And when I first started learning this stuff, I had a learning partner that I met with every week for 30 minutes. And what we did, and I encourage all my clients, they all do this, is we get together for 30 minutes and we each bring up one issue that happened today or the day before where we were below the line. And you'd use the tools to see if you'd be willing to let go of the pattern. And it just, the more you do it, the more it just happens.
I think that's key, because you got to have, you have to almost embed it in your calendar, your week or your day, or because if you just listen to this and then you go about your day, like, yeah, you'll maybe take an understanding from this and learn from it. Yeah, but like, you have to, like you said, what are you going to do about it? Like, there's got to be a practical side to say, do I evaluate this every couple of days, end of week? Do I need an accountability partner? Do I hire Clay? Like, what am I going to do about it to actually make this change? Because even I think about when I saw you live, I was like, oh man, this is so good. And like, I'm going to implement this stuff. And some of the stuff I do still recognize today that has been useful, but some of it I'm like, yeah, I kind of got away from that. Like, I didn't like implement that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, there's regular daily practices, and it all starts, I think. I'm an advocate for coaching. I have a coach. I love coaching. Coaching changed my life. It's, picking at like any high performing athlete, they have a coach. And you can do things other ways. Like, there's videos. I mean, here's a video. You can watch this video 3 times and you'll probably learn each time. I don't know, hopefully. There's things you can do, but it just requires some effort. And the real question then becomes is, how important is this to you? That's a question I ask my clients all the time. Like, do you really want to change? Because it's probably easier just to stay the same way that you're operating now.
It's a question I love to ask people is, how bad do you want it?
Yeah.
1 to 10. And if they say 9 or 10, then I'm like, great, then what are your actions? How do your actions map that?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we say that and then the actions don't map that.
Yeah. Because you can, and I really believe this, like, I don't believe there's a right way to be in the world. But if you're wanting something that's different than what you have, there's lots of ways to go get that. Mm-hmm. And some of it may be just practicing this stuff. It has worked incredibly well for me.
I wanted to touch on, go back to the fear thing and the insecurities you mentioned with your wife, that you, and with CEOs and executives, that kind of part of the strategy or part of the way you overcome this is you have to sort of admit that you're below the line. Or and how I interpret that was, I've almost got to let my insecurities come out and the fear come out. Because what I found, and I'm curious what you probably would agree, I found that fear and insecurities almost, they like a host. They like to chill in a host inside and live in that dark space where only you know about. And as soon as you kind of let that out, it's like the fear, you can't breathe. It's like, I need to go to another host. I don't like the fact that you just threw me out there in front of, of somebody close to you. I found that when I remember I was wanting to step up and do leadership things at my previous corporate job. And I was wanting to run meetings, but I was scared like my face would get red and I'd get nervous. And then I'd even get more red because people would see me. And I had this whole reaction thing built in my mind that eventually kind of went away. But I remember one day, one of the leaders said, hey, Alex, or I was joking around. I grabbed a marker and I go, hey, I'll run this one. And he goes, sure, go ahead. And I go, no, I'm just kidding. And I kind of walked back and he goes, no, run the meeting. And I go, dude, I was just kidding. He goes, no, I know, but I want you to run it. You can do it. Yeah. So I got up there, and as soon as I was like, oh God, my face is going to get red. But then I did something different. I said, my face is probably going to turn red. I might be a little embarrassed, but you know what? I'm going to do this anyways. And guess what happened, Clay? It didn't turn red. Because
Did you say that out loud?
I said it out loud to the people. So that's why I've experienced that, like, hey, the insecurities, the things that you don't, the fears, the things you need to talk about, if you get those out to your team members, your spouse, whatever it is, it takes the power away from the fear and insecurity, and it gives it freedom to you.
Beautifully said. That's it. When you shine a light on it, it loses its power. Here's the other thing. I imagined 95% of the other people in that room, if they were handed that dry erase marker, would have had the same experience that you were having. So my guess is, I've had to deal with this too, like panic stuff. Like, how much time do you have? We could talk all about this.
Yeah, right.
And we're more similar than we're different.
Right.
When it comes to this stuff. I mean, if you look at lists of the most stressful things, like, we hate public speaking. Right? I mean, if you think about it, like, again, if we use our model, security, approval, control, like, we are flying right in the face of losing all three of those things, potentially.
Right.
It's innately scary. And so I actually think there's all kinds of room for building connection when we break down those walls. I have this, part of my practice and my own journey is revealing my anxiety if I'm below the line. And I got to tell you, not only does it help me navigate, but I actually create connection because everyone else feels exactly the same way most of the time. So it can be once we get past the fear of not saying it, it can be just, oh my gosh, I made such a big deal about that thing. And now we're all laughing about it because we all have that in common.
To me, it's a sign of strength. The fact that you can put that out there and say, yeah.
There's a lot to be said about what a powerful leader is and does, and sharing what's true for them in the moment. Not just the rosy things,
right,
but all of it. I want to be led by that person.
A couple things that you mentioned in your LinkedIn post that I wanted to ask you about. You said, quit believing your own thoughts. The little gremlin who whispers self-defeating thoughts to you.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we talked about that. There's a lot we can talk about that. So we talked earlier about these young parts that get scared. And back in the day, they were really helpful. Like the example you had about when you were in school, right? And you learned that it doesn't feel good to not be accomplished in school. So as an adult, it would make sense to me, I would imagine at some level you have a little voice that shows up that says, you better be successful. You better not screw this up. Because that's that part that we were talking about that believes that anything but excellence means I'm not worthy. Yeah. So this could be a little controversial.
So do you, really quickly on that, do you like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, like
Okay.
Michael, all of these high level athletes, was it just a lot of it just like the insecurity and the fear and them wanting to, or do you think maybe they were driven by something else? I don't know if you spent time studying them or not, but it almost seems like people at that level have some type of like, I need to be competitive. I need to win so bad. Otherwise, I'm not going to be worthy. It's like good for them and their sport, but also it's like, isn't there something inside that is, right?
Well, so I imagine that they're different. They're not the same. I have not studied elite athletes, but there's something else going on. Aside from their physical excellence, the drive that they have.
And probably same in entrepreneurship with the obsession level of drive, or sometimes even for myself, I'm like, dude, you're obsessed with this.
Because for those folks, failure isn't an option. And if they were here in the room, I would start to get curious, when did you learn that? From who did you learn that?
Well, because I'm thinking I've said many times with my business before I took it full time, I said, I either make this work or I die. Like that was my mentality, and it was just like failure wasn't an option. It was like, I'm just going to do this. And I think maybe part of that was just so that I would, like, it was more or a mind trick for myself, to be like, I'm not giving myself an out or an excuse here.
You scared yourself into excellence.
Yeah, right. Okay. Exactly.
That's one strategy.
Right.
It seems to work okay. And by the way, I also tell people, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Right.
So that strategy works for you. Keep going. But I also start to get curious. Like another approach would have been, you want to know, even if this thing is a huge failure, I'll figure out the next thing and I'll be better because I just would have learned what didn't work. So I don't think that's the only option.
I gotcha.
I think we can be more gentle with ourselves.
What's the biggest thing for you that you've transformed in your own life from kind of learning these principles? If there's one thing that you say, man, I know you mentioned a couple of things, but if there's one thing that really held you back before that now you feel like, man, I've really been able to overcome this.
Well, the thing that I've overcome most of is still the thing I think about every day, is that it's very similar to you and very similar to a lot of people. My worthiness is not correlated with my performance. I catch myself in that pattern all the time. And I just have to keep reminding myself, wait a minute. No, I don't, like, it's great to perform if it's fun. If I'm doing work I love doing, great. But it's not required for me to be worthy. And that it's constant work for me. Not constant work. It's not like it's a slog. But if I fall into that trap, which I can fall into, this work has enabled me to not get stuck in that trap. Mm-hmm. I have tricks and tips. I have trust now that I didn't have before.
Do you say someone's worth is it when you look at yourself, is your worth built in your character, your values, how you show up for your loved ones, yourself? Like where does the worth come from then?
I think those are, I think this can be open to interpretation. We can rationalize our worth with all those things you said.
Yeah.
I'm a good husband. I'm a good father. I've got great friends. And those are all true. And this is where we can get a little deeper into this idea of consciousness. But if I really get still, if I really get present, like if we start entering into this idea of mindfulness, if I'm willing to get really still, I may actually be able to experience that nothing is lacking, that there is connectedness between me and the world around me, where I'm actually not rationalizing anything, but there are ways in which to actually experience groundedness and presence. And if you can do that, then this whole idea of worthiness, this construct, can slip away.
We're about to go into a different layer in a second. Yeah. No, it's good though. It's good.
It's your stuff.
I love that. I love this. I could talk about this stuff for hours. I'm sure the listeners are like, don't end this, but I want to get to our last segment just for the sake of time. It's called the Thoughtful Threes. 3 thoughtful questions that make you think and allow our audience to learn. Okay. So the first one is, what's one piece of advice that you frequently hear related to your profession that you think is just completely wrong or misguided?
Funny you should ask that. Yeah, I'm kind of on this little bit of a soapbox around. So these little parts that whisper that we just talked about, people call them saboteurs. And there's this belief that when we identify those little gremlins, we need to crush them. We need to kick them out. We need to tell them that there's no place here for you. And I think it's just the worst approach to dealing with it. We don't kick a scared kid under the rug. We love the shit out of them. We understand why they're scared, and we let them know we're here and that they're enough.
Dang, that's deep stuff.
So there's, for listeners that are interested in what I just said, there's a guy named Dick Schwartz who came up with this amazing methodology called internal family systems, where he helps us get into a relationship with those parts. Wow.
What do you feel like is one thing right now, it's going to be a little bit more businessy. What's one thing right now that you know you need to do in your business as a founder that will help you grow your business, yourself, whatever, but you're just scared to pull the trigger on? Fear.
Yeah. Well, there's probably about 15 of these. Very recently, I started reframing who I am in the world around my business. I used to think I'm a coach. Now I actually think I'm an entrepreneur. And that's really changed the way I look at the world and how I look at my business, which is really kind of fun for me. So now I start thinking about, well, how do I scale? I don't want to scale this into be an enterprise sort of thing, but I do think it'd be fun to scale it a little bit. And I can get into the same pattern that most entrepreneurs get into around giving up control. I'm going to have someone else represent my brand. What if they're not as brilliant as I may make up that I am? Or what if they're not showing up the way that I want them to show up? That can get in the way of me taking steps to grow. So I can fall into the same trap that most of my clients fall into.
I could see that. I think it's also in the beginning scary to hire someone else because there's a financial implication of that too. Of like, I hire them, I got to pay them, I got this, and then if you do W-2, you got benefits. And so, there's a lot. What is one unconventional strategy that has paid off for you in your business? Something that maybe is like out of the box or...
An unconventional strategy.
I can ask you a different one too, if you want.
No.
Okay.
Here's the first thing that came to mind. So I was speaking at... I ran a session for a big student body at Kellogg, Northwestern University. This is a number of years ago. And I was sitting in my car incredibly anxious before going in and speaking to this group. And this is where I did something incredibly unconventional, and I used my fear to help me teach. So I showed up in the room, and I think some of the first words were out of my mouth were like, "Hey everyone, my name's Clay Stelzer, and if you were to really know me now, you would know that I am freaking out up here right now." And that's what we're going to talk about today, about how human beings freak out. So I use my own stuff.
Love that.
I don't know if that's unconventional or not.
It is. I think it is.
But, and I tell you what, I mean, that's one of those little, when I go with what's here, when I lead with my own stuff, I think it's not only a gift for me to move through it, but I think it's a gift for other people, because we all we're not that different from one another. We all experience many similar fears and other things.
Sometimes it's just so nice to hear it from other people, especially if it's an expert or someone you look up to and you say, "Wow, you went through that too? You're scared about that too? Yeah. Wow." Yeah. Like it's so nice. Yeah. I got one last question I have to ask this, because I always try to tie on like business or family and relationships and that kind of stuff. You're married for how long?
6 years.
6 years. When I ask people like, what's your one kind of like key recipe for success for a great marriage? People say like communication and that kind of stuff. What would you say? Because I feel like you have I'm sure you say communication, but maybe a level further than that. Or what is something that you feel like in your marriage that has been, if you were to give someone, if I'm getting married next month, what would be the advice?
So the advice I would share is, there's this idea of codependence. I'm happy to get into a long description here, but it's really easy for anyone in a relationship to get into a codependent relationship. Two married people. Here's what that means.
Okay.
I'm counting on you to show up a certain way for me to feel happy. So I'm dependent on you for my happiness. That's the way that the vast majority of relationships are founded in. We can get stuck there a minute, but I think we're pretty good at pulling ourselves out. The alternative is a co-creative relationship, where I tell her exactly what I'm wanting, and she tells me exactly what she's wanting. And then we support each other to get what we each want, taking responsibility for all of our triggers, all of our drama, all of our below the line stuff. But we're not saving each other. We're caring for each other. Because when you get into this codependent dance, that's a recipe for resentment and being pissed off and, kicking the cat and all the other typical stuff that happens.
Beautiful advice, man. This has been amazing. Where can people find you, Clay? Where do you want people to go? Because we're going to link things in the description, so they'll be able to go from website, LinkedIn, email.
So LinkedIn's great, and my website's great. So the website is 1560.com. However, people always screw up I could have thought about this before I established the brand, but it's 15sixty.com.
Yeah.
That's 1560.com. And then my LinkedIn profile, I think it's just linkedin.com/Clay Stelzer.
Beautiful. And what's most of the type of work that you do? I know you work with CEOs, organizations, and we kind of know what you do now, but is it one-on-one? Is it group coaching? Is it speaking events? All the above?
Yeah, 4 different things. One-on-one coaching with senior executives. First thing. Second thing is executive team coaching, where we have the whole team together and we're navigating what it is, or who you are as a team. What are the patterns that are in the way? Who do you want to become as a team? And how do you achieve that? Third thing is, I call it couples counseling, but it's really like the CEO and the COO, or like the visionary and the integrator. Like the two people at the top that need to be different, one with the big ideas and the other to land the plane. Again, sparks are natural and normal, so I do coaching around those duos. And then lastly, we do leadership circles, which is basically group coaching or forum coaching, where you have the same 10 people that show up either every other week or every month. They didn't know each other before the thing started, and they walk out the other end of this thing loving each other because they've done their work together. They've helped each other grow. I love that format.
Love that. I told you guys I've seen Clay speak live. So I've seen you live in action, which was amazing. And I personally know people that have worked, companies that have worked, CEOs that have brought Clay in and have had really transformations take place, and you've done great work. So if any of this resonates, guys, please reach out to Clay. I appreciate you being here, brother. This has been amazing.
Fun for me, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.